The war had ended, but peace had not yet begun. Across the stars, two great civilizations, the Valen Empire and the United Earth Coalition, stood on the edge of exhaustion. The battles had lasted for 10 long years. Thousands of ships were gone. Millions of lives had been lost. Now both sides were desperate for a reason to stop fighting. That reason came in the form of a political marriage. Princess Illyra of Valen, the only daughter of Emperor Serac, was chosen as the bridge between her proud empire and the humans she had been raised to hate. Her people said she was a symbol of Valen beauty and grace, tall, silver-skinned, with luminous blue eyes that shimmered in dim light. But Illyra felt none of that grace as she stood before her father's throne, listening to his decree. "You will marry a human," the Emperor said, his voice heavy and final. "This bond will end the bloodshed. It will bind our peoples in peace." Illyra bowed her head, hiding the storm inside her. To her, this was not peace, and it was surrender. Humans were impulsive, loud, and emotional. They were everything the Velans were taught to avoid. And now she would have to live with one, speak with one, and call him husband. Her mind whispered rebellion, but her duty was stronger. The fate of her empire depended on her silence. So she bowed and said the words she didn't feel. "As my emperor commands, so shall it be." 2 weeks later, the day of the alliance came. The ceremony was held aboard the ECS Solace, the flagship of the United Earth Fleet. The ship floated in the orbit of a neutral world, its halls filled with diplomats, officers, and guards from both sides. Illyra's long silver robe trailed behind her as she entered the main hall, her every step watched by dozens of human eyes. At the far end stood Captain Marcus Hale, the man chosen to be her husband. He was nothing like the terrifying figures from Valen propaganda. His uniform was simple, his stance calm. His eyes, a deep brown, held neither arrogance nor fear. Instead, he looked tired, as though he had seen too much of war and wanted no more of it. When she approached, he gave a small nod, a gesture of respect, not ownership. "Princess Illyra," he said softly. "Thank you for coming this far." His voice surprised her. It wasn't cold or commanding. It was quiet, almost gentle. She didn't answer, only inclined her head slightly as tradition required. The ceremony itself was brief. 2 representatives read the treaty aloud, and the couple exchanged simple vows of unity before witnesses. No grand celebration followed, only polite applause and stiff diplomatic smiles. When it was done, Marcus offered his arm, a human gesture of escort. Illyra hesitated before lightly placing her hand on his sleeve. His warmth startled her. Humans were always warmer than Valens, and she quickly looked away. Their quarters were in the upper section of the ship, near the observation deck. Marcus opened the door for her but did not follow. "These rooms are yours," he said, stepping aside. "If you need anything, press this panel. It will alert me or the crew." Illyra blinked in confusion. "You are not staying here?" He shook his head. "No, you deserve privacy. My quarters are next door. We'll discuss official matters in the morning." Then he paused, as if uncertain whether to add more. "I know this is strange. It's strange for me too. But I promise, and I'll do everything I can to make this easier for you." Without waiting for her answer, he gave a polite nod and left. Illyra stood alone in the quiet room, unsure what to make of him. She had prepared herself for arrogance, for demands, for orders. Instead, she had been met with space and respect. It was confusing. She looked out the window at the endless stars. Somewhere beyond them was her home. The shining spires of Valen Prime, the cool silver seas, the calm silence she missed already. Here aboard this human vessel, the air smelled different, the lights were brighter, and the voices in the hallway carried emotion she couldn't understand. Still, she felt something new. Not comfort, but curiosity. The next morning, Marcus came to escort her to the command deck. "The council wants to see that you're adjusting well," he said as they walked through the corridor. Human crew members stopped and saluted him, then quickly bowed their heads to her as well. Their gestures were awkward but respectful. Illyra studied them. None of them looked afraid of their captain. Some even smiled when he passed, as if they trusted him. That was strange. On Velan ships, soldiers never smiled in front of their leaders. She finally asked, "Your crew seems at ease around you. Do humans not fear their commanders?" Marcus glanced at her with a faint smile. "Fear isn't respect. I'd rather they trust me than obey out of fear. His answer made her pause. On Velen vessels, obedience was everything. Questioning orders was punished. Yet these humans seemed to function through trust and cooperation. It was the first time she realized that strength could look different. At the council meeting, human and Velen diplomats discussed trade routes and reconstruction efforts. Elira remained silent, her eyes observing everything. How the humans argued, laughed, and spoke freely even to those above them. No one was punished for speaking their mind. The atmosphere was chaotic but alive. When it ended, she followed Marcus out, her mind full of questions she wasn't ready to ask. Days turned into weeks. Elira slowly learned about human customs. She tasted their food, heavy but flavorful. She watched their art, their music, their endless energy. Marcus made sure she was never pressured. When she struggled with the ship's gravity, he personally adjusted the environmental controls. When she couldn't sleep, he brought her a holographic view of Velen Prime's twin moons to help her rest. He never asked for gratitude, but she found herself whispering it one night anyway. "Thank you, Captain," he smiled softly. "You don't have to call me Captain when it's just us." She looked at him unsure. "Then what should I call you?" "Marcus," he said. Just Marcus. It felt strange on her tongue, informal, simple, human. But she said it anyway. "Thank you, Marcus." The warmth in his eyes lingered with her long after he left the room. One evening, while walking the observation deck alone, Elira overheard voices from the nearby control room. "She's just a symbol," one of the admirals was saying. "A political prize to keep the Valens quiet." Elira's chest tightened, but before she could retreat, Marcus's voice cut through the room. "That's enough," he said sharply. "She's not a prize and she's not property. She's the reason we might finally stop killing each other. Show some respect." Silence followed. Elira stepped back quietly, her heart pounding. No one had ever defended her like that. Not her guards, not her advisors, not even her father. On Velen Prime she was valuable, yes, but never truly respected as a person. She stood by the window for a long time afterward, watching the stars move past the ship's hull. Her fear of humans hadn't vanished, but it had changed shape. It was no longer fear of cruelty. It was fear of understanding. Fear of realizing that maybe everything she had been taught about them was wrong. That night, she found Marcus working alone in the mess hall reading reports. He looked up and smiled faintly when she approached. "I heard what you said earlier," she said softly. He blinked. "You weren't supposed to." "I did." Her voice was quiet but steady. "You spoke for me when you didn't have to." "Why?" Marcus leaned back thinking. "Because it was the right thing to do. You deserve respect, and no matter what politics say." Elira looked at him, seeing him not as an enemy or even an ally, but as something rarer, a human being who saw her as more than a role. "Perhaps," she said after a pause. "Humans are not as simple as I was taught." He smiled at that. "We try not to be." Later, as she returned to her quarters, Elira realized something unexpected. The walls no longer felt as cold. The silence no longer felt heavy. For the first time since the marriage began, she didn't feel trapped. She felt curious. And curiosity, she realized, was the first small step toward trust. Princess Elira woke early the next morning, her mind full of thoughts she couldn't escape. She had dreamed of her home, the silver domes of Velen Prime, the calm voices of her attendants, the strict order of palace life. But when she opened her eyes, all she saw were the curved metal walls of the human ship ECS Solace. The air smelled faintly of steel and something sweet. Coffee, she had learned. Humans loved that drink. She had tried it once and nearly coughed at the bitterness, but Marcus had only laughed softly and said, "You'll get used to it." She had not yet, but she was beginning to get used to him. The days passed quietly. Elira had expected humans to be loud and careless, but the crew surprised her. They were disciplined yet open-hearted. They smiled easily, spoke freely, and treated each other as equals, something unheard of in her empire. Every morning, Marcus walked her through the ship's different sections, showing her how humans lived and worked. He didn't rush her, didn't demand she smile or speak, just explained things in simple words. "This is hydroponics," he said one day, as they entered a large room filled with green plants. "We grow food here. Fresh air, too. Humans can't survive long without green things." Elira looked at the plants curiously. "On Velen ships, we recycle air through machines. Living plants are inefficient, Marcus smiled. Maybe, but they remind us of home. Sometimes what keeps you alive isn't efficient, it's meaningful. His words stayed in her mind long after they left the room. When she was alone, she began exploring the human library database. She read their literature, watched their history logs, and studied their art. The more she learned, the more confused she became. Humans had destroyed each other many times in the past, yet they also built, healed, and forgave. How could one species carry so much contradiction? That night, she stood by the observation window again, staring at the stars. She heard Marcus's footsteps behind her but didn't turn. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No," she said quietly. "Humans are difficult to understand," he chuckled. "You're not the first to say that. Even we don't always understand ourselves." Elira turned to face him. "You speak of chaos as if it's normal." He shrugged lightly. "Maybe it is, but chaos makes room for choice, and choice is what makes us human." His words puzzled her, but they also intrigued her. In her world, choice was rare. Her life had been planned since birth, every step, every word, every duty. She had never been allowed to choose anything that truly mattered, but Marcus spoke as if freedom was a right, not a luxury. And when he said it, she almost believed him. Days later, the crew invited her to the mess hall for a cultural evening, an informal gathering where humans shared songs, jokes, and stories. She hesitated, unsure how to behave, but Marcus encouraged her. "It's not formal," he said. "Just people relaxing. You might like it." She almost refused, but saw the hope in his eyes and nodded. The mess hall was filled with laughter, warmth, and the scent of food. Someone played a small instrument called a guitar. The music was strange, full of rhythm and feeling. Crew members clapped along and sang softly. Elira watched them, amazed. On Valen ships, silence was expected. Emotion was considered weakness. Then Marcus took the stage. He wasn't singing, but telling a story. A simple one about a soldier who found peace after war. His voice was calm, his tone warm. Even without knowing every word, Elira could feel the meaning. When the crew clapped, he glanced toward her and smiled. And for the first time since she boarded the ship, she smiled back. After the gathering, she found herself walking beside him in the corridor. "Humans share stories to strengthen bonds?" she asked. He nodded. "Stories remind us who we are. Sometimes they help us heal." She looked thoughtful. "On Velen ships, we are taught to forget pain, not share it." "That's one way," he said gently. "But I think healing works better when you don't hide it." His honesty was disarming. She found herself saying, almost without thinking, "I have never met anyone who speaks so freely to me." Marcus chuckled. "That's because no one's told me not to." Elira looked at him curiously. "You are not afraid of punishment for speaking your mind?" He shook his head. "I'd rather live honestly than quietly." It was such a simple answer, but it left a deep mark on her heart. One afternoon, Elira decided to visit the training deck. Human soldiers were sparring with practice weapons. Their movements were rough but full of spirit. When they saw her, they paused awkwardly, unsure if she would disapprove. Marcus stepped in, smiling at the soldiers. "Keep going." "She's just observing." Elira watched closely. The humans trained not as individuals but as a unit, shouting encouragement, laughing when someone stumbled, helping each other up. It was not like the silent, cold training of Velan warriors. This was alive. "You fight like you live," she said to Marcus later. Together, loudly, he grinned. "That's one way to put it. Teamwork matters to us," her gaze softened. "It shows." That evening, as they walked through the quiet corridors, Elira spoke again. "Do you ever regret this? Marriage?" Marcus slowed his steps. "Honestly? At first, yes. I didn't want to be used as a tool for politics. But now," he paused, meeting her eyes, "now I think maybe it was meant to happen. Maybe peace needed something more than papers and speeches. Maybe it needed people who could learn from each other." Elira's heart beat faster. "Learn from each other?" "Yes," he said simply. "You taught me how patient your people are. I'm trying to show you how open ours can be." For a long moment, they stood in silence, two souls from different worlds sharing the same air. The next day, a small misunderstanding gave Elira her first glimpse of human kindness beyond Marcus. While visiting the med bay, she accidentally brushed her hand against a hot diagnostic panel and flinched. A young human nurse rushed forward immediately. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, his voice full of concern. I am fine, she said, quickly embarrassed, but the nurse insisted on scanning her hand, applying a cool gel. Just making sure, he said with a smile. She stared at him, surprised. No one had ever spoken to her like that, casually, kindly, as if she were not royalty but simply another person who deserved care. Later, she mentioned it to Marcus, still puzzled. Your people are strange. They treat others with care even when it is not required. He smiled softly. That's how we survive. The universe is big and cold. Kindness keeps it from swallowing us. Alira thought about that long after he left. Kindness. A word so simple yet powerful enough to reshape how she saw humanity. One night, the stars outside seemed brighter than usual. Alira found herself standing beside Marcus again at the observation window. The Earth flag glowed softly on the nearby console. Your people look at the stars with hope, she said. Velans look at them with caution. Hope keeps us moving, Marcus said quietly. Without it, we'd still be fighting. Alira turned to him, her voice softer than before. You speak as if you truly believe peace can last. I do, he said. Because now it's not just about treaties. It's about trust. And trust starts small between two people. His eyes met hers. The silence that followed wasn't heavy or awkward. It was warm, a quiet understanding that something was changing between them. For the first time, Alira didn't feel like an outsider. She felt seen not as a symbol, not as a tool, but as herself. That night she wrote in her personal log, Humans are not what I expected. They are flawed, yes, but they care deeply. Captain Marcus Hale confuses me, not with power or pride, but with gentleness. Perhaps peace is not a treaty, but a lesson, and I am still learning. As the ship drifted quietly through the stars, both of them, Human and Valen, began to understand that their alliance was no longer just political. It was becoming something much greater, a bond built not by force, but by empathy. And though neither dared to speak it aloud, both knew the same truth. The cold walls between them were finally beginning to warm. Peace always looks strongest right before it breaks. For weeks, Princess Alira and Captain Marcus Hale had lived in a rhythm that almost felt natural. The days were filled with quiet talks, walks through the ship's gardens, and meetings about rebuilding trade routes between humans and Velans. Each day, fear turned into respect, and respect slowly turned into trust. But peace is fragile. And far from the ECS solace in the dark corners of space, not everyone wanted it to last. A faction of Velans known as the Pure Line had rejected the alliance. To them, the marriage between a human and a Velan royal was a disgrace. They called Alira a traitor of the bloodline. They believed that if she could be taken or killed, the Empire would have no choice but to return to war. And so, under the shadow of a silent moon, a stealth ship began to move toward Solace. Alira didn't know any of this. That morning, she was in the command center, helping Marcus review a trade report. She still felt unsure using human technology, but Marcus was patient as always. You're learning faster than my cadets did, he said with a grin. She looked at him, pretending to be serious. Perhaps because I have more motivation. Oh? He asked. And what's that? To avoid making mistakes in front of you. He laughed softly. That's not motivation. That's fear. You don't have to fear me, Alira. She looked at him, her voice calm. I don't, not anymore. Before he could answer, the ship's alarm blared through the corridor, a deep, echoing sound that froze the air around them. Marcus's face turned serious. That's not a drill. He tapped his communicator. Bridge, report. Captain, came the voice of the officer. Unidentified ship on approach. They're using cloaked tech, not human signature. Shields up. Marcus's jaw tightened. Figland technology, he muttered. Alira's heart skipped a beat. Velan, but who? Before she could finish, the deck shook violently. The lights flickered as the Solace took the first hit. Impact on the lower hull, the officer shouted. They're boarding. Marcus grabbed Alira's arm gently but firmly. Stay behind me. In the chaos, human soldiers rushed through the hallways, preparing for defense. Alira followed Marcus toward the inner deck. Explosions echoed through the ship, and the sound of blaster fire filled the corridors. Marcus handed her a small silver device. Press this if we get separated. It'll alert me to your position. She looked at it, hesitating. You think I'll need it? I hope not, he said. But I'm not taking chances. A squad of armored humans met them at the junction. Marcus gave quick orders. Protect the princess. No one gets through this corridor. Aelira could see it now, the change in him. The calm, patient man she knew was gone. This was the soldier, the commander who had survived years of war. Yet even in the chaos, his voice was steady, his movements controlled. He didn't shout orders in fear. He led with purpose. Moments later, the enemy appeared. Tall figures in black Velan armor, their energy weapons glowing cold blue. Aelira recognized the sigil on their shoulder, the mark of the pure line. Her breath caught. Marcus, they're my people. He gave her a quick look, eyes sharp but calm. Not anymore. They chose violence. You didn't. The battle began. The humans fought with discipline, forming lines and covering each other. The Valens fought with speed and precision, their movements silent but deadly. Blasts of light filled the corridor. Aelira ducked behind a console as Marcus fired beside her. Every time she looked up, she saw him, moving, protecting, commanding. He seemed untouchable, his every action measured and sure. But when a second wave of enemies appeared from the side corridor, Marcus saw what Aelira didn't. One of them aimed directly at her. Without thinking, he moved. The blast struck him squarely across the chest, throwing him to the ground. Aelira froze. Marcus! She rushed to his side, ignoring the sound of battle around her. His armor had taken most of the damage, but the impact had been strong. His face was pale, breath heavy. He forced a weak smile. Still, alive. Her hands trembled as she touched the edge of his armor. You shouldn't have done that. He coughed lightly. Couldn't let them take you. You're too important, her voice cracked. Important to who? The treaty? He met her gaze, his voice faint but clear. To me. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Even with alarms blaring and soldiers shouting, all she could hear was that one word, me. Then the human reinforcements arrived. The attackers, realizing they couldn't win, began retreating toward their shuttle. The moment the last one vanished, the ship's systems went quiet except for the low hum of emergency power. Aelira stayed beside Marcus, refusing to move. In the medbay, the doctors worked quickly. The human medical team surrounded Marcus, treating his burns and injuries. Aelira stood outside the glass wall, her heart aching. She wanted to help, to speak, to do anything, Sundiayan, but all she could do was wait. Every few minutes she asked the nurse, "Is he stable?" The answer was always the same. He will be. When they finally allowed her to enter, Marcus was lying on the bed, pale but awake. You look worse than the ship, she said softly, trying to smile. He gave a weak laugh. I'll recover faster, she sat beside him. You risked your life for me, why? He turned his head to look at her. Because I couldn't let them take you. And because peace means nothing if it can't protect even one life. Her throat tightened. No one in her life had ever spoken that way. Not her guards, not her father, not even her advisors. To them, peace was strategy. To Marcus, peace was people. You're a fool, she said quietly. Probably, he whispered. But I'm your fool. She blinked fast, unsure why her eyes felt warm. You should rest. I will, just promise me you won't blame yourself for this. It's not your fault. She wanted to argue, but seeing him so weak silenced her. She simply nodded. Hours later, as Marcus slept, Aelira stood by the window of the medbay, staring at the stars. The attack had changed everything. The Pure Line's message was clear. They would not accept peace. They would destroy anyone who stood for it. And she had been their target, yet what burned in her heart wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. She had seen humans fight, not for conquest, not for pride, but for one another. And she had seen one human nearly die for her, even when she had once feared him. She whispered softly, You risked everything for me. I will not let that be in vain. When Marcus woke again, he found her still sitting beside his bed. How long have you been there? He asked quietly. Long enough, she said. He smiled faintly. You didn't have to stay. I wanted to. There was no more distance in her voice. The walls between them were gone. For the first time since the war began, the Princess of Velan and the human captain looked at each other not as strangers bound by politics, but as two souls who had crossed fear, pain, and fire and found something greater on the other side. Later, when the ship's systems were repaired, Elira stood before the council of both humans and Valens via hologram. The attackers called themselves Valens. She said firmly, "But they do not represent my people. They represent the past. I stand with humanity, because I have seen their courage, and I have seen their heart." Her words echoed through the hall, stronger than she ever thought she could be. As the transmission ended, Marcus, still resting but awake, whispered from across the room, "You spoke like a queen." She turned toward him and smiled softly. "Perhaps I learned from a captain." That night, as the ECS Solace drifted quietly through space, both of them knew the truth. The alliance was no longer just a treaty signed on paper. It was written now in courage and sacrifice, and in trust, the kind that could never be destroyed by war or fear again. And those stars burned silently outside. Inside the ship, something new had begun to glow, the quiet fire of understanding between two hearts from different worlds. The corridors of the ECS Solace were quiet after the attack, but the weight of what had happened lingered. Princess Elira moved through them with a sense of purpose. Each step echoed her determination. She would no longer be a passive figure of politics. She had witnessed the bravery of the humans, the discipline and loyalty of Marcus, and the courage of those willing to defend peace. And she knew now that the alliance was fragile. If she faltered, war would follow. That morning, the council reconvened. Holographic images of Velan territories, human colonies, and trade routes floated in the center of the chamber. The human admiral spoke first. "The pure line will not stop," he said. "They will continue to challenge this union unless we act. Their attacks are not just symbolic. They threaten the stability of both our species." Elira listened carefully. When the admiral paused, she rose from her chair. The room went quiet. "I wish to speak," she said. Her voice, though soft, carried authority. The council, both human and Velan, turned to her. Some Velans looked skeptical. They were unsure if a princess who had been kidnapped by duty could speak for the Empire. But they did not interrupt. Elira drew in a steady breath. "I was given to a human as part of a political plan," she began. "I admit that at first I feared this. I was taught to see humans as unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I have seen what humans can truly be. I have seen courage, respect, and kindness. I have seen one human, my husband, risk his life for me. And I have realized that humanity is not what I was taught to fear. They are capable of greatness beyond what any treaty can describe." There was silence. Even the human admiral looked slightly surprised. Elira continued, "I will not return to Velan Prime to be hidden or protected from my people. I choose to stay. Not because I was given no choice, but because I now see what peace can be when it is built on respect and trust. Marcus Hale did not make me feel like a symbol or a tool. He treated me as a person, and because of that I will stand by him." Her words hung in the air like a comet frozen in space. Some Velan delegates whispered angrily, but the human council remained silent, allowing her voice to carry. Finally, an elder Velan diplomat spoke. "You speak of choice, Princess. But your people see this marriage as dishonor. How can you claim loyalty to both?" Elira met his gaze steadily. "Loyalty is not blind obedience. Loyalty is protecting what is right. Marcus does not represent the end of our people. He represents the possibility of a new beginning, one where humans and Velans learn from each other, instead of fighting endlessly." A murmur went through the room. Even humans were impressed by her clarity. Marcus, standing beside her, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "She speaks with courage," he said softly. Elira's eyes met his. In that moment, the distance that fear had created melted completely. She was no longer a captive. She was a partner, equal, strong, and determined. After the council meeting, Elira and Marcus walked along the observation deck. The twin suns of the nearby planet bathed the corridor in golden light. "You were magnificent," Marcus said. "I didn't know you had that in you." "I didn't either," she replied. "I realized that courage isn't about weapons or armies. It's about choosing to stand when everyone expects you to kneel." He nodded. "That's true for humans too, but you inspire more than you know." Elira felt her heart warm. "Then we will need to inspire our people, both Velan and human, to trust again. It won't be easy." "No," Marcus agreed. "But I think we can do it together." The thought of working side by side, not as strangers or rulers, but as allies and friends, made her feel something new. Hope. The following days were filled with preparations for a diplomatic mission to GalacticPrime. Elira had insisted on returning with Marcus, not as a pawn but as a representative of her own choice. The journey was tense. Felon soldiers watched them closely, unsure if their princess had truly changed. Human crew members remained vigilant, knowing the Pure Line could strike again at any moment. During the trip, Elira spent hours with Marcus discussing strategy, diplomacy, and her people's customs. She learned more about human negotiation techniques, patience, and compromise, lessons that her palace tutors had never taught her. In turn, she taught Marcus about Valan traditions, showing him that honor and duty could coexist with compassion if approached correctly. Together, they found a rhythm, 2 species, 2 hearts, learning to move as one. When they finally arrived at GalacticPrime, the palace guards were tense. Whispers of rebellion filled the halls. Elira felt a pang of unease. Returning home was not like she had imagined. Her people expected her to return humbly, to avoid contact with humans. But she had made a choice. She stepped forward, dressed in ceremonial robes that shimmered silver under the twin suns. Marcus followed, dressed in his human uniform, standing respectfully by her side. The palace hall was filled with Valan officials and soldiers. The Pure Line had not yet revealed themselves, but Elira could feel their disapproval. She raised her head. "I am here by my own will," she declared. "I am no longer afraid of humans. I am no longer afraid of making my own choices. And I stand here not as a symbol of peace, but as proof that trust and respect can unite even the most different of peoples." Gasps and murmurs ran through the crowd. Then Marcus stepped forward. "Your Highnesses, leaders of GalacticPrime and citizens of the Empire," he said firmly, "I am Marcus Hale. I am not here to rule, to dominate, or to take. I am here to work with you, to protect your people, to honor your traditions, and to ensure that this alliance is not just a treaty, but a lasting bond built on understanding." Elira looked at him and smiled. Together they had chosen their path, not forced, not expected, but earned through courage and care. Over the next few weeks, Elira and Marcus worked tirelessly. They mediated disputes, explained human customs to Valan advisors, and shared stories of the recent attack to show the cost of hatred. Slowly, perceptions began to change. Valan soldiers saw that humans could be disciplined and loyal. Valan diplomats noticed that humans could respect traditions without ignoring them. And Elira noticed something remarkable. She no longer felt like a bridge or a symbol. She felt like herself. She had chosen her path, and she was shaping the future. One quiet evening, Marcus and Elira walked through the palace gardens. The twin moons reflected on the silver waters, creating patterns like threads of light. "You've changed everything," Marcus said softly. "Not just here, but in how your people see humans." "I couldn't have done it alone," Elira replied. "You showed me what kindness and courage really mean. You taught me that respect is stronger than fear." He took her hand gently. "And you taught me that listening and learning can change even the hardest hearts. We've both grown." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the twin moons. "Then let us keep growing. Together." He nodded, squeezing her hand. Together. For the first time, Elira felt complete, not as a princess or a symbol, but as someone who could shape the future, side by side with someone who had earned her trust and her heart. And so, the seeds of true peace began to take root. The Pure Line remained, watching and waiting, but their power was diminished. Elira and Marcus's bond had shown the people of both species that cooperation was possible, that courage and kindness could overcome fear, and that choices made with respect could rewrite history. As the palace settled under the quiet glow of the moons, the princess and the human captain stood together, a living testament to what the universe could be, when 2 different hearts chose to fight for understanding instead of war. The first rays of the twin suns touched the spires of GalacticPrime, reflecting off the silver towers and casting long shadows over the city. For the first time in years, the city felt quiet, not tense, peaceful, not fearful. The people moved with curiosity instead of suspicion, their eyes flicking to the princess and her human companion. Princess Elira stood at the palace balcony, looking out at her people. The past months had been difficult. Battles, negotiations, and the constant threat of the Pure Line still lingered. Yet today there was a new feeling: hope. Behind her, Marcus Hale stepped onto the balcony, his uniform neat but his expression soft. He had grown used to the customs of Velen Prime, even bowing politely to officials he had met only a few times, but he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned respect through action, not title. "You're smiling," Marcus said, glancing at her. Illyra turned, a gentle smile touching her lips. "I am. Look at them. People moving freely, not under fear, not under suspicion. They are beginning to understand." Marcus followed her gaze. The marketplace below was alive with humans and Velans mingling, trading goods, sharing stories. Velan children laughed as human children tried to mimic their movements, and humans marveled at the shimmering beauty of the Velan city. "It's different from what I imagined," Marcus admitted. "I expected hostility, suspicion, maybe even anger." Illyra shook her head. "I expected fear. But fear is changing, and slowly, because of you. Because of us." Their journey to reach this point had been long. After the attack on the ECS Solace, Illyra had chosen to stay with Marcus, to defend the Alliance not just as a duty, but as a personal commitment. Together they had faced skepticism from her people, the lingering threat of the Pure Line and the immense challenge of building trust between two very different civilizations. Now, months later, their efforts were beginning to bear fruit. Velan officials were holding regular discussions with human diplomats. Trade agreements were flourishing, and cultural exchanges were becoming common. Illyra had been amazed to see the Velans she had once feared begin to smile and laugh with humans. It was a small miracle, but it was real. "Princess," one of her advisors approached quietly, "the council wishes to meet with you. There is news from the outer colonies." Illyra nodded, letting Marcus walk beside her as they entered the council chamber. The room was large and filled with holographic displays of distant planets and star systems. Human and Velan representatives stood together, talking quietly in small groups. "Princess," the Velan chief diplomat said, bowing slightly, "we have received reports from the outlying territories. There are signs that several colonies previously under the influence of the Pure Line have chosen to follow the new council's guidance. They are supporting the Human-Velan Alliance." Illyra's eyes lit up. "This is progress," the diplomat nodded. "Yes, Princess. And more importantly, they respect your choice to remain with Captain Hale. Your example has inspired many to rethink their old beliefs." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "See? You're making a difference." She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "We're making a difference. Not just me, not just you, and together." Later that evening, Illyra and Marcus walked along the palace gardens. The silver paths reflected the light of the twin moons, and the air was cool and fragrant with the scent of night-blooming flowers. "You've changed everything here," Marcus said softly. "Not just the council, not just the people. You've changed the way I see the universe, too." Illyra glanced at him, curiosity in her eyes. "And how is that? I thought humans were limited to logic, technology, and emotion that could cloud judgment. But watching you and your people, I've learned that courage, empathy, and understanding can shape more than treaties. They can shape hearts. You've shown me that every species has the capacity to grow beyond fear." Illyra smiled softly. "Then we have both learned from each other." Marcus nodded. "Yes. And perhaps that is the true strength of humanity. To learn, to adapt, and to care even when it is difficult." Her heart fluttered. "You make it seem simple," he shrugged. "Maybe because it is, if you choose it." In the weeks that followed, Illyra and Marcus worked tirelessly to strengthen the alliance. They established new educational programs, cultural exchanges, and communication channels between human and Velan worlds. Slowly, trust grew where there had once been suspicion, and admiration grew where fear had once dominated. Illyra often visited schools, watching Velan children learn human songs and humans learn Velan customs. The laughter of the children became a symbol of hope, the living proof that understanding could overcome centuries of fear. One day, as Illyra observed a group of students painting murals together, Marcus stood beside her. "You've given them more than trade agreements and peace treaties," he said. "You've given them something they can feel, something that makes them want to work together." Illyra nodded. "It is small, but it matters. And every small step is part of a greater journey." Marcus smiled. "Then let's take that journey together." One evening, under the glow of the twin moons, Illyra and Marcus returned to the palace balcony. The city below shimmered with lights from homes and markets, but above it all, The stars stretched endlessly across the sky. "I used to fear you," Elira said quietly, her voice almost lost in the wind. Marcus turned to her. "I know, but not anymore," she continued. "I used to fear humans and your species, your ways. I thought you were unpredictable and dangerous. I was wrong. You are everything I never knew I needed to see." Marcus reached out, taking her hand gently. "And you are everything I never thought I could protect. You've taught me patience, understanding, and the courage to see beyond my own world." Elira's eyes shimmered as she looked at him. "Then perhaps this was never about politics. Perhaps it was always about understanding one another heart to heart." He smiled softly. "I think it was. And now we get to show the universe that fear doesn't have to define the future." The next day, the palace announced a new era of cooperation. Velen emissaries and human delegates gathered for a ceremonial event, celebrating the newly strengthened alliance. Children waved flags representing both species. Musicians played songs from both cultures, and citizens of Velen Prime filled the streets with curiosity and hope. Elira and Marcus stood side by side, their hands clasped gently. The crowd cheered, not for a princess or a human officer, but for what they represented together: courage, empathy, and the possibility of a brighter future. Elira glanced at Marcus. "Do you ever think they'll truly understand us?" "I think some already do," he replied, squeezing her hand. "And others will learn just like we did, and slowly, patiently, with care." She smiled. "Then let us keep teaching them." "Yes," he agreed. Together. As the festivities continued, Elira realized something profound. She had feared Marcus and by extension humanity for so long. She had feared the unknown, feared loss, feared betrayal, but those fears had been replaced by trust, by respect, and by a sense of belonging she had never known in her palace. She looked around at the mingling of Valens and humans, laughter echoing in the streets. For the first time she felt truly free, not just from fear but from expectation, from the weight of tradition that had once confined her. And at her side, Marcus mirrored her feelings. He had entered her life as a duty, a challenge, and a responsibility. But now he was her partner in every sense, in courage, in choice, in heart. That night, alone on the balcony, Elira whispered to the stars, "I was afraid once, but no longer. We have built something greater than fear. We have built trust, understanding, and hope." Marcus stood silently beside her, gazing at the same stars. "And we will protect it," he said softly. "Always." She turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the twin moons. "Together?" "Together," he said. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to a human and a Velan who had chosen empathy over fear, courage over caution and love, quiet, steady, enduring love, and over everything else, the universe, vast and unpredictable, seemed a little smaller that night, not because it had changed, but because humanity, through kindness, courage, and understanding, had proven that even the smallest hearts could shape the greatest worlds. And so, Princess Elira and Captain Marcus Hale stood side by side, not as ruler and soldier, but as equals. Not as symbols or pawns, but as living proof that trust could cross stars, species, and generations. A proof that hope, kindness, and courage were stronger than fear. The dawn had truly come.